Hey dudes, and welcome back to The Bants. As always, I am your host, The Bants, and it is time for our headline of the week. And in our headline of the week, let's talk about Ralph Lauren. So, Ralph Lauren doesn't really need much of an introduction, does he? Dude's just an absolute legend, as he and his eponymous label celebrated their 50th anniversary this year. And whether you're talking classic menswear, Americana, prep, polo, or any other sports for that matter, and of course, how could we possibly forget his Madras patchwork? You name it, he's probably done it. He even dabbled in techwear for a bit, even if that was short-lived. But out of everything that he has done, there is one thing that he's always kind of steered clear from, and that is streetwear. And no, neither his main label or any of his sub-labels classify as streetwear, even if he has a somewhat sordid past with the streets. With what I'm referring to here being the lowheads, or more specifically, the low lives of the late 80s and 90s, which I will not really be diving into here because honestly, that could be its own video all by itself. And really, it's okay that he's never done streetwear because he's done perfectly fine without it. Well, mostly. You see, just like with everything else, things change. Fashion changes, style changes, trends change, and sometimes a brand that has always done well and was especially popular through the late 80s and 90s and even up until the early noughts just can't always keep up. I say as if 20 years of dominance in the industry is just peanuts or something, but I mean, let's look at it this way. For those of you who've been following fashion for a little while now, aside from just this last year, how many of you have seen anything really interesting or exciting come out of Ralph Lauren in the last, I don't know, 15 or so years? I'm gonna guess probably not that many. Even I can only think of a few things myself, the ones that really come to mind being some of the more highly technical pieces that came out of the RLX subline and some of the stuff that came out of Double RL during the height of the raw denim phase. But even both of those moments were very shortly lived, and it seems many others felt the same way because unfortunately back in 2015 he ended up stepping down as CEO of his own brand, though he still remains the chairman and chief creative officer to this day. But when all this happened, he ended up writing a letter to all of his employees and the public at large, making it clear that even though yes, he was in fact stepping down, that he would also be stepping it up, so to speak. And you know what? Ever since then, with the help of Stefan Larsson, who ended up taking over as CEO for him back in 2015, even though he ended up leaving back in 2017, things have really started to change. But don't get me wrong, it's not like this was any kind of radical change per se. I mean, all of those tried and true styles are still there. I mean, in fact, they never really left. But for the first time in a long time, Ralph seems to have his finger back on the pulse of fashion again. Though this insane 90s resurgence we're currently going through definitely doesn't hurt either. But even if that is somewhat the case, I still don't want to diminish what he and the brand have been doing up until recently. In the last few years, we have finally seen the re-release of many of his iconic collections, such as the Stadium collection, the High Tech collection, the Downhill Skier collection, the CP93 collection, and of course, above all the others, who could possibly forget the legendary Snow Beach collection. And of course, along with this, the release and re-release of almost as many polo bears, it seems. But the key thing here is that they didn't have to do this, and even Ralph himself seemed very opposed to the idea of re-releasing these collections for a very, very long time, possibly once again due to the history of these collections with the lowlifes. But the fact of the matter is that they did, and they did so pretty much before everybody else, or at the very least they caught on very quickly after seeing brands like Fila and Champion start to just steamroll the competition once again. And in turn, we've seen many other similar brands, such as Tommy Hilfiger and Nike ACG, just to name a few, trying to play catch-up ever since. But even aside from that, we've also seen the Ralph Lauren brand try to innovate, and I'm not just talking about in the normal ways you'd expect, such as the web and working on social media or working with social influencers. No, what I'm specifically talking about is something they haven't really done much before prior to these last few years, and that is, of course, collaborations. In the last year, we've seen them do some collabs that would seem safe or kind of in line with things that Ralph Lauren would normally do, such as the collaboration with pro golfer Billy Horschel, or their exclusive capsule through Mr. Porter, or even their New York Yankees collaboration. But there was one collaboration that felt very out of the ordinary for the company, especially if you factor in Ralph's original beliefs about this style, and that was the collaboration with a specific streetwear company. But before we go further into that, let's backtrack a little bit to earlier this year, when we saw a very similar collaboration between well-known sneaker boutique Kith and Tommy Hilfiger. And just to briefly summarize it, I think that Tommy and Ronnie did an absolutely fantastic job with that collection. You may have remembered when I talked about it previously, and if you do, then you might remember that I actually called this collection one of the best and most cohesive collabs of the year. And based on how quickly it all sold out, it seems that many people echoed this idea. Well, it also seems like Ralph might have seen how well this collection had done, and finally decided it was his turn to try something in the same vein. And in doing so, I don't think really anybody was ready for what was going to come next, and that is of course the Ralph Lauren collaboration with European street and skate giant Palace Skateboards that dropped close to a month ago now. And if you follow fashion even just the tiniest bit online, you'll know that everybody was talking about this, from the point it was announced to every single sneak peek to its initial drop, and hell, I mean, I'm even talking about it now, even a month after its release. Now, as far as the collection itself goes, I think the two brands did an absolutely fantastic job with it here, and did a very nice job of blending the two companies into something very special in a very similar way that the Kith and Tommy Hilfiger collection went. Though this collection is by far loads more vibrant and crazy in terms of its designs and styles overall, mainly because the two companies here, Ralph Lauren and Palace, really excel in those styles. Plus, it was very nice to see the low bear getting included in such a unique way as well. And all in all, I'd definitely be much more inclined to wear this collection over the Tommy Hilfiger and Kith collection, though this is just entirely due to style preferences on my part. And I'm sure you're wondering, with such a wild and crazy collaboration coming out from Ralph Lauren, what do the lowheads and the lowlifes think about this collection? Well, in all honesty, there were a couple mixed reviews here and there, but for the most part, it was pretty much positive. The biggest complaint that I personally saw from anyone was that with Ralph Lauren actually diving into streetwear for the first time, they should have stuck to an American company, and preferably something larger or more renowned, and a lot of people, of course, were pointing to Supreme. But to those out there saying that, my reply is, whoever said that that's off the table? You never really know what the future may bring, and for all we know, this might have just been the first step into Ralph's foray into streetwear. And honestly, seeing how well the reaction and the turnout was to all of this, I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see larger and many more projects like this from them in the future. But now, kind of getting back to the matter at hand, what I really want to say to Ralph and his team and everybody else at the company is welcome back. After 50 long years and 30 years since its rise in popularity to the masses, it almost feels like we've come full circle. The brand that was made popular by the streets is now making its own streetwear with the help of a company that you can tell was definitely somewhat inspired by Ralph Lauren in the first place. And as for the new generation who is finally starting to hop onto the low hype train for themselves, welcome to each and every one of you as well. For those of you out there who are just beginning your descent into the rabbit hole that is Ralph Lauren, don't worry. As time goes on and you learn more about the company, you'll just learn to love it even more and more. And even though it's impossible to predict the future and to see exactly what will come next for Ralph Lauren and his company, I think that we can all agree on is that whatever it may be, at the very least, it will be interesting. And with that, thank you guys once again for watching my video and supporting my content. I hope you all have a great couple days until I see you next. And as always, until next time.